This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Leaders from the Asia-Pacific region seek to address most pressing global challenges in an online forum. We update you on the conflict in northern Ethiopia's Tigray region. And the progress made in developing an effective vaccine against COVID-19 amid surging cases worldwide. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Let's have a look at the stories coming up this hour. South Africa's president hails the country as an attractive investment destination. And in sports, the Great Ethiopian Run takes place with only 120 participants due to ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. We begin the hour in Malaysia, which is hosting the APEC CEO Dialogues. It opened today ahead of the leaders' meeting on Friday. For the first time, the gatherings are being held online due to COVID-19 as business and political leaders look to address some of the world's most pressing challenges. Gao Yiming has more.
As the world experiences a public health crisis triggered by COVID-19, the APEC economies say they're looking at new ways to tackle the problems of development as they seek to shore up economic resilience. Leaders this year are focusing on the digital economy, artificial intelligence, as well as improving trade and investment. Malaysian Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin stressed APEC's key role in global economy in his opening remarks Thursday morning.
As a grouping whose economies constitute about 60% of the global GDP, APEC assume a central role in spearheading post-pandemic economic recovery.
The transcontinental organization aims to create greater prosperity in the Asia-Pacific region, securing balanced and sustainable growth through economic cooperation. As the world's second-largest economy, China says it is against unilateralism and for win-win cooperation amid a serious global economic recession.
Mounting unilateralism, protectionism, and bullying, as well as a backlash against economic globalization, have added to risks and uncertainties in the world economy. However, peace and development remain the underlying trend of our times. Meeting challenges through cooperation is the only way forward for us in the international community.
Chinese President Xi Jinping insists his country has always kept its doors open to the world.
China is already deeply integrated into the world economy and the international system. We will not reverse course or run against the historical trend, or form a small circle to keep others out.
APEC leaders are expected to adopt a new post-2020 vision to improve market access and replace expiring Bogor goals at the leaders' meeting on Friday. And this comes after China and 14 other Asia-Pacific nations inked the world's largest free trade deal, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, last Sunday. Gao Yiming, CGTN.
26 years ago, APEC adopted the Bogor Goals, aiming for free and open trade by 2020. This year, it's launching a new vision as the world grapples with the social and economic costs of the pandemic. CGTN's Chuck Tint has more.
In 1994, APEC leaders met in the small city of Bogor, Indonesia, and agreed to a set of goals aimed at liberalizing trade and investment in the Asia-Pacific by 2020. Out of that meeting came the Bogor Goals. The idea was to reduce and reform trade barriers, improve market access, and generally promote the free flow of goods, services, and capital among APEC states. While over the years the economic performance of APEC's member economies has been uneven, the Bogor Goals largely worked. GDP across the region soared, and millions have been lifted out of poverty. As regional trade and cooperation has grown, attention is now turning to other development issues as well. In a policy paper published last year, APEC included security, education, infrastructure, and climate change amongst a new list of priorities. For this year, APEC leaders will replace the expiring Bogor goals and launch what they're calling a post-2020 vision. APEC's new goals are expected to further promote what they call free and open markets, but they also want to make economic policy across the region more dynamic and resilient. The three major items on the agenda are responding to the COVID-19 economic crisis, women's economic empowerment, and as the region faces growing environmental challenges, reorienting economic policies towards sustainability. Malaysia is hosting this year's virtual summit and will be charged with drafting a final document on a post-2020 vision. It's expected to serve as a roadmap for years to come. Chuck Tinte, CGTN.
China's State Council has stressed the importance of implementing the just-signed Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It said building the world's largest free trade zone will help stabilize industrial and supply chains. The State Council also laid out plans to boost sales of consumer goods, especially cars, and to boost consumer spending in the countryside. It also noted the great potential of China's tourism industry, with online tourism remaining crucial amid the ongoing pandemic. A shocking new report into war crimes by elite Australian troops has found credible evidence that soldiers unlawfully killed 39 people during the long-running conflict in Afghanistan. Greg Navarro has more in Sydney.
Last week, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison warned the public here in Australia that this report would contain information that would be very tough to hear, and he was absolutely right. That report compiled over a 4-year period. Even the Chief of Defense here said that there was information in that report that was very tough for him to read as well. And now it found that 25 elite Special Forces soldiers serving in Afghanistan were allegedly guilty of the unlawful killing of 39 Afghan prisoners and civilians, including teenage boys. It details alleged instances where new soldiers would shoot a prisoner in order to achieve their first kill, something that was referred to in this report as blooding. It also alleges that soldiers would plant evidence to make it look like victims were enemies killed in action. Now, it's apparently these killings, according to the report, began in 2009, the majority occurring in 2012 and 2013.
Turning to the Inspector General's report, he found none of the alleged unlawful killings were described as being in the heat of battle. None were alleged to have occurred in circumstances in which the intent of the perpetrator was unclear, confused, or mistaken. And every person spoken to by the inquiry thoroughly understood the law of armed conflict and the rules of engagement under which they operated. These findings allege the most serious breaches of military conduct and professional values.
Now, this very detailed, very heavily redacted report included interviewing more than 400 witnesses and reviewing thousands of pages of documents. In addition to all that, it recommends that 19 of those soldiers be referred to the Australian Federal Police for criminal investigation. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Sydney.
Meanwhile, Ethiopians have been fleeing across the border due to the ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. Aid agencies on the ground say people are in need of urgent humanitarian aid. The UN Refugee Agency said there are currently over 27,000 Ethiopian refugees in neighboring Sudan. Many are reported to have fragile health, as the majority of refugees are old people, women and children, many of whom trekked for days to the border without sufficient food supplies. The Sudanese government and several international organizations have set up an emergency aid center to collect information and conduct health examinations on the refugees. Sudan is calling for international support to avoid a large-scale humanitarian crisis. And joining me now is James Elder, the spokesperson for the United Nations Children Fund in East Africa. James, how are aid agencies coping with the influx of refugees from Ethiopia in Sudan?
Look, it's always difficult, a crisis at this level, going into areas that are hard to access, There's the urgent need always for food, for shelter, for water, remembering as well that a crisis like this puts enormous strain onto those host communities, those people who've already been there, who are often the first ones to open a door and open a sack of grain. So it's very difficult. This is what we do. This is what agencies like UNICEF and UNHCR do. We are frontline responders, but of course it would be best if all these people could stay safely in their homes.
Let's talk about children, James. They are particularly vulnerable in these kind of situations. What should be done to assist them during this conflict?
Yeah, it's a great question, Peninah. Thank you. Look, the communication blackout and general restricted access at the moment into that Tigray region means that we might have as many as 1 million, up to 1 million children in need of humanitarian assistance. That's assistance from agencies like us. We know there's up to 1 million kids who are no longer in school and all the protective elements that requires. Now, let's not forget that malnutrition was already on the rise for kids in Tigray. You had a locust infestation, we have a pandemic, and now we have this crisis on top. So UNICEF's grave concern is that if we can't get humanitarian access very, very quickly, if it's not granted, then more and more kids are going to be at risk. That means at risk of dying. The massive malnutrition work that we do in Tigray, we only have supplies on site until next month. So children need that. They also, of course, need protection. They need Peninah to be kept out of harm's way at all times in any crisis like this. You've got to make sure that children are, not in the firing line. Too often, that's not the case.
What about you, James? I mean, organizations such as yourselves, what kind of support is urgently required?
Access and safety. As I said at the start, this is what we expect to do. We expect to be on the front line. We expect to be reaching those people who we are here to serve. But humanitarian workers have to be able to do that job. So that is that we need unfettered and safe access to these places. So our major priority as UNICEF and other agencies is to reach these civilians, is to reach them and to keep children safe, as I say, to work on malnutrition, to make sure they've got things like life-saving water and food. But for that to occur, we need access and we need safety guaranteed. And that has to happen, today, basically, Peninah. There is no time to wait for kids who are already suffering or on the move.
I really do hope that access is granted. Thank you, James, for speaking to us. James Alder, the spokesperson for the United Nations Children's Fund. Now, Boeing's 737 MAX jet is set to return to the skies after a 20-month grounding, the longest in commercial aviation history. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration gave the all-clear on Wednesday, satisfied the plane is safe with software updates and pilot retraining. Crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed nearly 350 people, triggering a grounding of the jet. It cost the American plane makers some $20 billion. Boeing's best-selling jet will resume commercial service facing public mistrust and the coronavirus, which weakened travel demand. Aviation authorities in Europe, Brazil and China have yet to give it clearance. All the news of ungrounding Boeing's 737 MAX has not been well received by all. Relatives of crash victims have denounced the move, saying more needs to be done to ensure the plane maker is held accountable. The 737 MAX crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed 346 people within 5 months in 2018 and 2019. Families of the crash victims urged U.S. lawmakers in September to ensure the plane maker is held accountable for the accidents. They say deeper structural issues in the plane still need to be addressed. Ethiopian crash victims said on Tuesday they felt disappointment and renewed grief following the U.S. FAA's decision to return the aircraft to service.
We're fighting for our families and for public safety, and we're putting our voice out there about Boeing and the FAA and their safety culture and how they put profits before human safety. And that's extremely important for the public to know, especially right now as they're ungrounding the MAX. It still requires more work than what they've already put into it to make it safe. And I would suggest until the future notices, until all safety changes are made, that people would avoid the MAX. If you want to avoid the stress and the angst that it gives you to even be on a plane like that, you know, could potentially crash again.
My family and the crash families are very upset that this plane is going back in the air. We don't have a final crash report from the Ethiopian authorities. They haven't addressed the inherent instability of this aircraft, which is because of its actual configuration.
Now, as we've been reporting, Ethiopians have been fleeing across the border due to the ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. And aid agencies on the ground say people are in need of urgent humanitarian aid. So let's get the latest update on that conflict in the Tigray region. We are crossing live now to Addis Ababa. Girum Chala is standing by for us. Girum, the fighting in the Tigray region has been intensifying. What's the latest in this conflict?
Peninah, a few hours back, the Chief of Staff of the Ethiopian Army, General Branu Jula, briefed the media. He said that the battle in the north has been intensified and several victories have been registered under the name of the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Several strategic locations are being taken away from the TPLF's loyal forces in the north. In all battlefields, he said that victory is being seen and registered at the same time. The general also said that the march to Mekelle has also started. Overnight, there were so many gains made with that mission itself. And the battle for Mekelle is a bit interrupted because of the defense that they have faced from the special force of the Tigray regional state. He said that they've been breaking bridges and also demolishing roads which are taking to that regional state. On the other hand, 76 army generals and also police leaders have been chased, are being chased by the Ethiopian security force as they are accused of treasonous acts on the army and the country itself, and the Ethiopian government asked them to surrender, and they are still expecting the response from those generals to happen. So in general, the war is going on and the army is claiming that it's gaining a lot of victory.
All right, so the Ethiopian government says it wants to resolve this conflict swiftly. What measures are being put in place to especially end the suffering of civilians?
Well, we've been speaking to government officials, also the Prime Minister's office. The government is saying that it is trying to return the evicted citizens from especially Sudan, where thousands are now flocking into that country in need of shelter and security at the same time due to the conflict going on in the north. And they are saying that the government is ready to provide anything necessary, including protection, security for citizens, especially in the areas they are now controlling. But the problem is now it is impossible in some places to access because of the heavy war going on. The UN is complaining that the Ethiopian government is not cooperating. The Ethiopian government is saying it is doing its level best to protect its citizens from facing sort of death because of the war or also suffering. So what we know so far is that the government is promising to provide protection and also shelter and safety for its citizens, while at the same time the United Nations is saying that access to humanitarian services is still blocked due to also the communications problems. But at the same time, we all understand that people are still suffering. Many more are also crossing borders, continue to cross borders into Sudan, fearing for their lives because of the war.
All right, Girum, thank you for that. Girum Chala live in Addis Ababa. You're watching Africa Live. Time for us to take a quick break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The progress made in developing an effective vaccine against COVID-19 amid surging cases worldwide. And the communication challenges for the deaf community in Zimbabwe during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Shirishu, Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The world appears to be edging closer to a COVID-19 vaccine. China's Sinopharm has given its candidate to tens of thousands of people, saying it's seen no adverse health reactions. And American pharmaceutical giant Pfizer announced its vaccine is 95% effective. CGTN's Jim Spellman has more.
More encouraging news on COVID-19 vaccines coming from the U.S. and China. China has 5 vaccine candidates in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're seeing some promising early data. The vaccine developed by China's Sinopharm has been given to about 100,000 people, and none have shown adverse reactions so far, according to comments made by the company's chairman, who also noted that 56,000 people who have received the vaccine have traveled overseas and none have contracted COVID-19. A study published in British medical journal The Lancet finds another Chinese vaccine candidate to be safe and effective, this one from Sinovac Biotech, though the company has not released complete efficacy data.
The Lancet is a world-renowned scientific journal. The relevant reports published by relevant Chinese companies fully demonstrate the safety and effectiveness of Chinese vaccines.
In the U.S., Pfizer says its vaccine is 95% effective and 94% effective in adults over 65. A particularly vulnerable group. The company will seek emergency use authorization in the coming days. This follows similar findings from Moderna's vaccine candidate. Both companies expect to begin production and distribution by the end of the year.
We can be heartened by the rapid pace of scientific progress, including extremely encouraging data showing a high degree of efficacy for candidate COVID-19 vaccines in large-scale clinical trials. Never has a vaccine been developed in so short a time.
As Americans eagerly wait a vaccine, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved an at-home COVID-19 test. It will cost about $50 and deliver results in about half an hour, but the test is not expected to be in widespread use until early next year. Jim Spellman, CGTN, Bethesda, Maryland.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved the first COVID-19 self-testing kit for emergency home use. The kits provide coronavirus results within 30 minutes, and doctors hope early detection will help control the spread of the virus. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more.
This single-use test kit could be a game-changer in the detection of the coronavirus. In the U.S., the nose swab test is available only by prescription. The kits are manufactured by Lucira Health, based in California. The company initially developed it to test the flu, but this year they're using it to test COVID-19 in clinical trials.
What you will find is the test of a sample vial, a couple of batteries, a swab, and then the instructions.
The all-in-one test kit involves 3 steps: swab, stir, and detect.
The steps are: take the batteries out of the wrapper, insert it into the device, ensuring the orientation is correct, unwrap the nasal swab, swab each nary 5 times, and then take the swab, dip it into the vial, swirl it around 15 times, take the swab and discard it, close the cap, and then push the whole thing down, which will engage the process of testing. And that gets the test started, and then you'll get a result within 30 minutes.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has allowed it for emergency home use. The FDA says the kit can be used by individuals aged 14 and above. That's if the healthcare provider suspects they may have COVID-19.
It is awesome to get more testing capacity through a test like this. It is really awesome also to be able to offer testing that is quick, that you can get the results immediately, and a test that you can offer to patients at home.
The Lucira test is expected to cost around $50. The company says it will not be available nationwide until early March next year. It hopes by June the FDA can amend its emergency use authorization. so that people can consult online with doctors who can prescribe the test and ship it directly to patient homes. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Pregnant women in Zimbabwe have been at greater risk of life-threatening complications during the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic, combined with a health workers' strike, caused significant disruption to the country's health facilities. Farai Mwakutuya reports.
When COVID-19 broke out in Zimbabwe, health workers, like many other people, were fearful of the new disease. The uncertainty around the pandemic resulted in disruptions to service delivery.
I think initially when someone got infected, we'd say close the facility, and then until maybe we get to the bottom of what has happened.
That cut off expectant mothers' access to critical care.
Initially, about 75% of Zimbabwean women used to deliver under skilled attendants. In other words, under a qualified service provider. Whether it's a midwife, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a nurse who is not a midwife, but it's qualified care. But this went down from 75% skilled attendants. We were probably getting about 20% skilled attendants.
Which led to an increase in home deliveries.
There used to be hospitals providing cesarean sections for difficult births. But then with COVID now, getting transport to get to the hospital was a problem. So what happened? A number of women were struggling to give birth, and by the time they arrive in hospitals, they actually are fatal. They die.
A health sector strike made matters worse. Almost all of Harare's 42 municipal clinics ground to a halt in July. City of Harare says service has since resumed at 70% of them. But some, like this one behind me, are still closed, meaning women who need to access maternal services here have to travel far to access them. Despite this, the city attended to more pregnant women and more deliveries.
Really, our antenatal care numbers have gone up this year. Actually, figures, when we looked at our figures up to the end of September, we are up by 25% from what we anticipated, which is up 25% from last year's values. That's the same as well as institutional deliveries that are happening within our facilities.
While COVID-19 imperiled many lives, it's also led to innovation in reaching pregnant women in rural areas.
Because they couldn't get to the facilities, we look for the food distribution center, where the health providers of that district will be there that day to also assess nutrition and piggyback some of the maternal health services.
Taking maternity services to women and helping pregnant women access maternity waiting homes could save many lives until the pandemic is brought under control. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Still in Zimbabwe, access to information and health services is crucial during the COVID-19 pandemic, but it remains an uphill battle for the deaf community. The World Deaf Organization estimates that 80,000 people in the country live with a hearing impairment. The Sunrise Sign Language Academy is among the initiatives in Zimbabwe trying to bridge this communication gap. Let's take a look.
What started off as a series of hospital visits in 2012 soon opened eyes of one Douglas Mapeta. He discovered that those with hearing impairments had a challenge of communication between them and medical practitioners. Douglas was motivated by the desire to bridge the gap and devoted himself to 2 years of sign language study. Today, he runs a facility that trains individuals from all walks of life in like manner. Douglas solidly believes that sign language breaks barriers which sees those with speech and hearing impairments exploring life's opportunities without fear of being misunderstood.
The institutions, the churches, you name it, different organizations, they cannot communicate with the deaf, hence there are no deaf people in those institutions. This is the challenge of the deaf people, and yet if we are to learn this language, we are to employ them. We are to use them. They are also to employ us and start their companies. Sign language should be a household tool. If it is a household tool, who should be trained? Everyone.
The World Deaf Organization estimates that 80,000 people have hearing impairments in Zimbabwe. These individuals are often prone to abuse and they find it challenging to access essential services such as health. Sometimes they are negatively portrayed as outcasts due to societal beliefs in superstition. During these times of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Academy has been forced to minimal interaction. But the use of new media platforms has made sure that the deaf are not marginalized in accessing information on the disease.
We're having TV adverts that are being shown about coronavirus and other diseases such as TB and HIV, whereby we are sending information so that the deaf have access to know what is COVID-19, what are the symptoms, and how best to get access to the hospital.
Though certain hurdles are yet to be conquered in attending to individuals with special needs, a positive turn was witnessed in Zimbabwe in 2013. The country's constitution recognized sign language as one of its 16 official languages. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
Here's a reminder of our top stories. Malaysia is hosting the APEC CEO Dialogues. It opened today ahead of the leaders' meeting on Friday. For the first time, the gatherings are being held online due to COVID-19. Ethiopians have been fleeing across the border due to the ongoing conflict in the Tigray region. Aid agencies on the ground say people are in need of urgent humanitarian aid. The UN Refugee Agency said there are currently over 27,000 Ethiopian refugees in neighboring Sudan. And the news of ungrounding Boeing's 737 MAX has not been well received by all. Relatives of crash victims say more needs to be done to ensure the plane maker is held accountable. The 737 MAX crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed 346 people within 5 months in 2018 and 2019. Coming up in business news. South Africa's president hails the country as an attractive investment destination.
Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has hosted the third South Africa Investment Conference. The event is an integral part of the country's efforts to grow domestic and international investment. Initially, the investment target was $75 billion over 5 years. And this year, 50 companies have committed to investing $6.8 billion locally. Angela Kupla has more on this story.
In the first 2 years, $41.5 billion worth of investment pledges were received. This year, the focus has shifted slightly, according to President Ramaphosa.
We want to consolidate the commitments that have been made to date to ensure that they are realized, to make sure that these were not just statements and announcements that were pronounced by corporate leaders. We want to see this 664 billion rand translated into new factories, production lines, mining operations, retail outlets, as well as infrastructure.
The mining sector remains important to the South African economy. It's been the biggest recipient of investment flow since 2018. with some $3.8 billion being invested locally. The Minerals Minister has set his priorities.
The first one is aggressive investment on exploration, because exploration is the lifeblood of mining. So if we are not upping up our standards in exploration, mining is not going to grow. The second one is to be more serious in investing in artisanal and small-scale mining, so that we actually mine those minerals that are sterilized by big companies and boost the production of the industry.
Looking back at the last 2 years, Ramaphosa was pragmatic about progress made. 19 projects have been completed or launched. 44 projects are under construction.
Unfortunately, 21 projects representing around 10% total commitments have either been delayed or are on hold as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, something which is quite understandable.
Business leaders are feeling upbeat about investment prospects and the country's future.
The future does look positive. I think the issue, though, is the fact that with investments, it's a little at a time. So to the public, it may appear as if nothing is happening. But the important thing is that for us to be able to host events like this is an indication that investors are right behind government. We all want to see a better South Africa, and we are all there to co-create it with government.
There's a sense of optimism in the country at the moment, despite the pandemic and its crippling effects on the economy. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's turn to Tanzania now, where the newly re-elected President John Magufuli has laid out his priorities for the next 5 years. Among other things, he's pledged to focus on the transformation of key parts of the economy while removing hurdles facing investors who want to deploy capital in the East African economy. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has the details.
President John Magufuli is in Parliament to lay out his plans for the next 5 years. Big on his agenda is growing the country's economy. He says achieving his goal will require the efforts of all Tanzanians.
We need to have many Tanzanian billionaires, including parliamentarians. I want all Tanzanians to fully take part in building their country.
The president wants to see economic growth of 8% annually and 8 million jobs created over the next 5 years. He also wants to see increased domestic and foreign investment in the country's industries. To this end, the president is offering tax cuts and improvement of the country's investment climate.
There has been a lot of bureaucracy and hassle for investors and a lot of time wasting, causing them to lose hope. I want an investor with funds to get the necessary permits within 14 days.
The 2020 Doing Business report indicates that Tanzania has climbed 2 positions to the 141st position globally. But the country still lags behind its East African neighbors, Rwanda and Kenya. According to the United Nations 2020 World Investment Report, foreign direct investment in Tanzania reached $1.1 billion in 2019, about a 5% increase from the previous year. President Magufuli hopes that attracting more investment will not only translate into the economic growth he desires, but also into better lives for ordinary Tanzanians. Business people in the country are generally optimistic about the government's plans, but say it must address their challenges.
Most business people had the ability to travel abroad on their own to buy merchandise, but things have become difficult since the coronavirus hit, so we have to use proxies to order things, and so it is really affecting us.
If the government helps us get those investors with deep pockets, I think I can go far and reach where the president was talking about, having many billionaires. I can be among them.
I can be among them.
The road ahead for President Magufuli may not be an easy one. The World Bank projects growth of 4% this year from the previous 7% due to the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. Just how well the country navigates these hurdles to improve Tanzanian lives remains to be seen. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Cairo International Airport topped Africa in cargo transport in 2019 as air freight increased by 12% on an annual basis. Kenya's Jomo Kenyatta Airport was ranked second, while Johannesburg's Oliver Tambo Airport dropped to third after topping for 2 years in a row between 2017 and 2018. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The best airport for air cargo is chosen based on the amount of goods that arrive there, how fast are the procedures for clearing the cargo, the number of flights that use the airport, the size of the cargo village, the variety of products that can be stocked, and whether it's a hub for collection and distribution throughout the region. A statement from Egypt's aviation ministry said Cairo International Airport had handled over 360,000 tons in 2019, out of a total 2.5 million tons in the continent.
لو جينا ننظر على النقاط اللي تسببت في كده.
How did Cairo Airport achieve this? We'll find that in 2019, the airport dealt with 361,000 tons of goods inside the cargo village. The location is vital with easy access to Africa, Europe, and Asia. New capabilities allowed for more variety of products such as medicine. Several international inspections have given the airport high rankings in terms of quality of services. It's known that cargo clearance usually takes time. Officials here have upgraded services, introducing the one-stop shop, which speeded up this process.
Experts believe Egypt Air, the country's flag carrier and main handling service provider at Cairo Airport, has been a valuable element in the airport's cargo division.
Egypt Air Company handles 65% of air freight activity in the airport. It has 6 airplanes, including 3 new Airbus planes, each with a capacity to carry 55 tons on every flight. Egypt Air also plans to add its small and medium-sized planes into the air freight fleet. The company uses vacant areas on passenger flights for cargo as well. All this has increased cargo activity at Cairo Airport, pushing it to top spot.
More emphasis now is on the air cargo industry as an alternative source of revenue after the huge drop in passenger flights due to the coronavirus pandemic. Africa has seen an increase of freight activity by 0.2% in 2019. However, experts say it's still low, as it amounts to only 2.1% of total international cargo activity. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Let's take a quick break. Coming up, how Gabon's only circus troupe is coping with COVID-19 disruptions.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To South Africa, where concerns continue to rise about environmental pollution in Cape Town. Worrying levels of E. coli bacteria have been recorded in some of the city's rivers and canals. High levels of E. coli not only make water bodies unfit for recreational activity, but also pose a potential health hazard. CGTN's Travis Andrews has this report.
There's a concerning environmental problem on the horizon. High E. coli levels are being recorded in some of Cape Town's waterways. That includes the Milnerton Lagoon, which is a popular inlet commonly used for recreational activity. A team of researchers and water experts embarked on a fact-finding mission to understand the extent of the city's water contamination problem. The results they gathered startled them.
We took 12 samples actually altogether, and in various places along our route. Our route is about 27 kilometers long, and so sampled it probably every 3 or 4 kilometers apart in these various waterways. All of those water samples, barring 2 of them, were all well over the safety limit, as it were, for contact with that water, indicating that that is fairly polluted water.
Those swimming in affected waters risk taking in a pathogen when E. coli levels reach counts of over 1,000. Counts from some of the samples taken by the team reached 2,400, well over the government's limit for recreational water use at 500 counts. Experts say the pollution issue is not confined just to waterways alone. Studies have shown that chemicals present in sewage are also present in marine environments, including in sediment and beach sand, which point to far broader contamination.
Chemicals that we've looked at are compounds that we use in our everyday. For instance, muscle relaxants like diclofenac, antibiotics like sulfamethoxazole, carbamazepine, which is an antiretroviral drug.
The signage may be clear to see, but some people are not heeding the pollution warnings. Many still utilize the water for all types of recreational activities, including collecting fishing bait. Through its urban, livable waterways initiative, the city hopes to establish itself as Africa's leading water-sensitive city. But it will have to deal decisively, not just on issues such as E. coli, but some of its root causes. And that includes insufficient sanitation in informal townships, which often lead to pollution in canals, as well as inefficient wastewater treatment plants that are unable to properly process the sewage. The city does, though, plan to spend billions on practical measures to fix the pollution problem.
So the city has developed a number of pollution abatement plans for a number of the river catchments within the city. For example, one particular catchment that has received a lot of attention is the Deep River catchment.
Fortunately, the E. coli issue does not impact Cape Town's drinking water system or supply, but it does underscore just how widespread the problem can become when the pollution is left to spread unabated. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
In Gabon's capital, Libreville, young circus performers are holding to the hope that their hard work will pay off. They're training to become seasoned artists so they can have contracts, travel and make a living from their artistry. But the country's only circus troupe and its only circus school is facing ruin since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. It has been almost 9 months since they last performed, but older members say the circus was struggling even before the pandemic hit.
In the heart of Gabon's capital, Libreville, lies the Circuit du Okata. It's the only circus troupe and circus school in the African country. It once represented Gabon at the world's biggest circus festivals, but now cannot afford even basic safety equipment. The slump in business started in 2005, members of the group saying.
Nobody calls us. None of the companies can call us because of COVID-19. It's very complicated for the troupe, since this is what we do for a living.
At the circus's home base, the trees carry red signs recalling the glory days. The ground still bounces to the rhythm of the acrobatics, but according to older members, the site is a shadow of its former self. They have been searching for help from private sponsors and the authorities. The Ministry of Culture stopped paying its annual subsidy of $900 in 2009. It could no longer keep up with the demands of a modern circus.
What the different circuses and consorts are asking of us today is a greater preparation and a greater performance. And to be able to achieve that performance, we have to go through training, and to be able to train, we need equipment.
The circus school trains 19 students artists aged from 8 to 14. These aspiring performers come from the local neighborhood. Training is free, as the circus objective is to shape unemployed young people through art. Not everyone makes it through training, but some refuse to give up hope, their shared dream to represent Gabon internationally. Chao Mhono, CGTN.